Welcome to our LA ACM SIGGRAPH May 12, the Virtualization of Hollywood. Tonight, we're hosting an incredible panel of experts to discuss how digital pipelines and virtual production are fundamentally shifting the visual effects industry. I am Abeline Harper, the chair of LAACM SIGGRAPH, which stands for Los Angeles Association for Computing Machinery, Special Interest Group on Computer Graphics Professional Chapter. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Tranel Bland, VFX Virtual Production and Stage Manager. Tranel, thank you so much for being here and for guiding this much-needed conversation. The show is yours.
Thanks, Evelyn, and good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for being here for tonight's panel discussion, The Virtualization of Hollywood. I'm Tranel Bland, and I'll be moderating tonight's conversation. Over the last decade, but especially over the last few years, we've witnessed one of the most significant technological shifts in the entertainment industry that we've ever experienced. The way films, TV, immersive media, and even games are being created is fundamentally changing in real time. Production is no longer confined to physical sets, linear workflows, or traditional post-production pipelines. Today's storytelling increasingly exists inside interconnected digital ecosystems. We're seeing the rise of real-time rendering engines, virtual production stages, LED volumes, AI-assisted workflows, volumetric capture, digital humans, persistent assets, and cross-platform pipelines. And perhaps most importantly, we're seeing the boundaries between filmmaking, animation, gaming, and interactive media beginning to dissolve. What used to separate industries are now sharing tools, sharing workflows, and in many cases, sharing talent. A director can walk into a stage and see final quality environments rendered in real time. A previs asset might evolve directly into a production asset. A game engine can become a live cinematography tool. There's been a profound shift where discussions that used to happen months later in post-production are now happening on set, during production, collaboratively, and instantly. It's easy to talk about virtualization in broad futuristic terms. We're constantly hearing phrases like the future of filmmaking. When we see headlines about AI replacing artists, fully virtual productions, or studios building massive LED stages. But despite all the technological advancements, many of the hardest problems in production remain deeply human, such as communication, iteration, creative alignment, ownership, cost, and time. And the constant balancing act between artistic ambition and production reality. An interesting thing about the current state of the industry is that virtualization isn't just changing technology, it's changing culture. It's changing the relationship between departments. It's changing the relationship between studios and vendors. It's changing the expectations clients bring into production. It's changing what artists are expecting to know, and it's changing the language of storytelling itself. The idea of a pipeline used to simply imply a fairly linear progression, but modern production environments are increasingly circular, iterative, and interconnected. Assets move back and forth between departments. Real-time engines blur the lines between previs and final pixel. Virtual art departments collaborate directly with cinematography. Game engines influence camera language. AI begins automating portions of workflows that once required entire teams. And these tools create incredible creative opportunities, but they can also introduce new tensions. What makes this panel especially exciting is that we have people here tonight who represent very different parts of this evolving ecosystem. There are people who are working inside the systems that are shaping the future of entertainment right now, not theorizing from the outside, but building it, troubleshooting it, adapting it, and in many cases, redefining it as they go. So tonight's panel will explore the reality of where the industry actually is and what it means for the future workforce entering the industry today. We'll also open things up later for Q&A later in the evening, because many of the most important conversations around these technologies are not just happening inside major studios. So again, thank you for joining us. and let's jump in with our panelists. The first guy I'd like to introduce is Ian Coyne, joining us from Atomic Arts. He's overseen high-end visual effects services and co-productions for some of the industry's biggest film and television projects. Ian's worked closely with major studios, including Paramount, Disney, Netflix, Apple, Amazon, Universal, and 20th Century Fox, and with credits spanning across projects like Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, The Creator, Young Sherlock, and Lilo and Stitch. In addition to large-scale studio work, Ian also brings extensive experience from the commercial production world, producing campaigns for brands and organizations ranging from NFL to Hyundai to Taco Bell and Disney. His perspective sits right at the intersection of production, client expectations, and the realities of delivering complex VFX at scale. And with that, let me introduce Ian. Take it away, Ian.
Tranel, thank you very much. First, I'd like to say thank you to Abilene for having me. I really appreciate that you've put this on. Tranel, thank you so much. That was actually a very good monologue, and I think it gives a good explanation of what is going to happen tonight. I also want to say thank you to all the panelists. I am in such good company tonight. I think you guys are going to really enjoy yourselves. So to give you just a very quick background on me, I've been in film for 30 years. I started as a child actor, went on to be a junior agent at CAA. I did development for companies like Permit Presentations and Echo Lake. It was a very fantastic experience. I produced indie film for companies like Whitewater Films, then went into EPing and bidding commercials at Deutsch. And then ultimately now I've wound up at Atomic Arts, overseeing co-productions and serving as the Los Angeles executive producer on the sales side. And so my perspective tonight is a pretty broad one, and I'm going to be focusing a lot on AI and where it actually is today. I know that this is a discussion that a lot of people are having, and I know that they explain where things are going to be in 3 years, and 2 years, and 5 years, and 10 years. At Atomic Arts, we're very hyper focused on where we are today, what we can offer to studios and our clients, ways of bringing down cost while maintaining quality. So I have a little presentation. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. So this is a presentation that we've been giving to the studios, and we call it Atomic Intelligence, Practical AI for VFX Production. A little background on the company. We were recently on Rings of Power, Lilo and Stitch, John Wick, the Alien films, Young Sherlock, and a variety of other films and television products at the studio level and the high-end independent level. The reason why we've gone in this direction is film has a need for faster iterations. Content demands have increased vastly with more viewership and significantly more streaming. Pipelines have become very complex, and models have now become good enough that AI can actually be used feasibly in production. So now I'm going to go over a couple production examples with you, but I do want to preface by saying, while we do have examples that are in major studio IPs right now, unfortunately, I cannot show any of them because AI being a very new tool, those projects have not yet released. And so I just have to give examples and videos that kind of give you an idea of what we can do, but let me stress it hasn't gone through final comp. And so these are not finals. These are more like samples of what is coming. So the first example that we're getting a lot of mileage on is face replacement. We have one particular project that we're working on. There is a well-known actor. Gentleman is getting a little older, and he's having a lot of trouble with the stunt work. So we brought in a stuntman who has a very similar build to the gentleman. And this would have been something traditionally that could have been very expensive. But due to AI and machine learning, we were able to create a fantastic LoRa, bringing down the cost of this particular function by about 75%, which is actually very impressive. And so face replacement is a fantastic area that is being used in production right now. Another really good example is background replacement. Please keep in mind this is not production final, but it gives you an idea of what you can do with backgrounds, moving things around, adding clouds, changing buildings. Effectively, this winds up offering our clients and our directors significantly more options, which is really important to us. We also have building replacement. which is something that we've been doing quite a lot of. Again, this is not a final, but this gives you an idea of the kinds of things that we can do today. Object replacement has been very, very successful. And we do actually have a particular project that we've been working on that had the umbrella issue. We had another project we were working on with sunglasses. The sunglasses were branded. The studio executives went to the sunglass company to get the clearance. And of course, they say, show me the money. Well, in the past, they would have had to just pay up and you would have been stuck with it. But what we were able to do is switch these glasses out at a really, really competitive price while maintaining quality. Another fantastic example is cosmetic replacement. You can change hair color, you can change eye color, you can do all sorts of wonderful things with cosmetic replacement. And this is another area where we have seen a lot of progress. We've also noticed that we can do some great wardrobe replacement. We have a particular project that we're on right now where they had a dress with a slit. The director loved it in the moment, but looking back now, everybody hates the slit. They sent us photographs and images of the dress that they want, and we're in the process of inserting that in. And because of machine learning and AI, something that absolutely would have been too expensive just 2 years ago becomes feasible now. AI makes previously unaffordable shots possible. The net effect is this is very artist driven. And I think a lot of people have fear that this replaces the artist. And in reality, it does not. This is just another tool in the toolkit. It makes the ocean a little less deep, but it also makes the ocean significantly more wide. The volume of what we can do goes up, and the options that we can offer to directors goes up significantly. We get faster iterations with no loss of quality. And let me just make a little note here that AI gets us 80% of the way, but we are a traditional VFX house as well. And so our compositors and our artists take it that last 20%. There is no situation where AI is getting us 100% of the way. These solutions are very, very cost effective and allow for a lot of options and give significant creative flexibility. Generative AI expands what we can do without expanding the budget or diminishing quality. It's become another tool in the VFX toolbox. And for everyone who's here today, I think it's really important that it's a tool that you include. Because in my discussions with the studios, regardless of what you hear in the trades, everybody is moving forward in some capacity with it. And little by little, the legal hurdles are being jumped. And so we call ours atomic intelligence. And that pretty much covers my area of the presentation, but I'll be focusing today on a lot on AI. So later on, if you have questions, feel free to ask me. And now I'm going to give it back to you, Tranel.
All right. Thanks, Ian. I appreciate that. Next up, we have next presenter, Martin Hall. He's a two-time Emmy Award-winning VFX supervisor whose career spans more than 2 decades across film, television, and virtual production. Martin currently serves as the in-house VFX sup for CBS VFX Paramount, overseeing projects for Paramount Plus and other studio-level productions, with recent projects including Hacks, Dexter, Original Sin, and DMV. His credits expand everything from Bird Box Barcelona Into the Badlands into major feature films, including The Bourne Identity, Mission Impossible, Thor, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Men in Black 2, and beyond production. Martin's also an educator at the Noman School of Visual Effects and serves on the board of managers for the Visual Effects Society. Martin brings a rare perspective that bridges practical filmmaking, traditional VFX, and today's ever-evolving production pipelines. So with that, I'd like to give the floor to Martin Hall.
Thank you, Tranel. Yeah, fantastic to be here. I'd love to talk about some of the reasons why we use virtual production. So, I guess, the big thing is, environments, sure. But, it's usually we can go out and shoot locations, great. One of the big factors, obviously, is budget, location, and tax incentives. You gotta face facts with that. So sometimes we do end up using a lot of visual effects just to rebuild those environments to make it cost efficient for productions. Now, I do a lot of history work as well, and that's a great use case for this technology and rebuilding these environments, period accurate. And then again, there's logistics and safety issues that pop up, which I think is of huge value, and we use a lot for productions, stunt-heavy productions, and just logistic nightmares that are far safer for actors. So let's take a look at some of the stuff we do at CBS VFX. This is more of traditional visual effects. But that being said, a lot of it is environment centric and rebuilding. We also do have virtual production. We do both LED stage on Paramount lot, our stage 1, and then currently in stage 3, we also have a new front projection system using Christie projection technology. So, most of this is just traditional visual effects, as you would see. But some of our stage work, serves many purposes. We use it for marketing, which is great for the in-house teams. That makes a lot of sense. We also, the good use case scenario of having backgrounds and environments for, long intensive sequences and, difficult things to execute over time. So again, you got to match the right concept, the right preconceived needs up front. And then of course it, serves a purpose very well. Our current front projection system is huge. It's 24 feet high and 100 feet wide. Very good for technology and reflections and everything you'd want to see in your built-in environment, which is fantastic. Yeah, so again, we do a lot of scanning of environments. We do photogrammetry. We use Gaussian splat techniques for post-processing as well. And again, we do a lot of different use case scenarios. It could be marketing, it could be feature level, it could be episodic, and for the streaming services. But we know a lot of this is historical recreations. We did, I personally did work on The Offer, which is rebuilding Los Angeles in a period accurate time frame, which is great. Let's take a look at some of that. And then currently, as Tranel has mentioned, I've got a couple of shows that are, get in some pretty heavy environmental situations. So I've got, in the past, we did The Offer. That's a great, period piece centric Los Angeles in the 70s, classic Paramount timeline. Rabbit Hole was a Paramount Plus Kiefer Sutherland show, rebuilding a lot of environments specific to match Toronto, and a lot of environment work there. And in that case, we actually used traditional game engine technology. So it was an interesting use case scenario. Very fast, very efficient, and came on budget fantastically. Very similarly, it was Smile 2 for feature work. We did some traditional LED work outside Windows environments, which is a fantastic use case scenario for different locations. Boston Blue and Hacks are my two current shows. Boston Blue is a Toronto-based show, and we do have use case scenarios where we're recreating Boston-centric. We shoot in two locations. We shoot both in Boston, and we do a lot of stage work in Toronto. But there are those mixing and matching technologies where we have to bring these two worlds together. So I'll give you a peek of that, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the hacks background as well. For example, this is a good street in Toronto, and we have a situation where we want to reveal Boston Harbor, so a very straightforward rebuild environment, and several thousand hours later we're there. So again, it's location based off of tax incentives, and then it's story centric storytelling. Can't show too much of this, but I'll talk a bit about hacks, which is coming up this week. This particular winding down of season 5. This is a great scenario where it's like, okay, how do you shoot in Las Vegas and shut down and control in a complete environment and make it safe, make it efficient, make it timely and not impact the city, and shoot it literally in the same location, as well as virtualize assets and control more assets, and then mix and match these technologies to make it all come together. So a lot has gone into us figuring out between camera, production design, visual effects, locations, how do we bring all these factors together and make this work for the storytelling. So of course it all starts with boards. It all starts with story planning and location scouting and figure out how the hell we're going to do this, right? Very challenging logistics. We have to rebuild a lot of this environment. So we mix and match and leaned into production design, which Rob Tokars did a fantastic job with his team, building out an asset on Universal's lot. And then we built out much of the rest of the environment for a lot of these different backgrounds. So a lot of drone work or a lot of traditional production coverage. We scanned the crap out of Las Vegas and of course tried to as much as possible, low impact while shooting, while shutting down, while trying to control the situation. go around and get what we can get, both drones and ground crews, gathering information for rebuilds. Drones, flying for both production and leading into what we knew we needed for production storytelling, but again, the more technical aspects of what we needed for post-production. Work together with those teams, rebuilt the better part of this strip block, and of course, trying not to shut down and impact the entire strip, which is a huge challenge. Working, of course, closely with production and, of course, with talent in a very modular way, both location, stage work, and completely synthetic rebuilds. Also, similarly, working in some AI and synthetic media technologies. Much of it is mixing and matching that whole world. It's ground-based, keep it very grounded, but then how do we keep actors safe? How do we not impact the world into a minimal, impact, and how do we keep it on budget? Again, it's going to entail shutting down some stuff. It's a big endeavor, but again, as much as I love practical locations and digital, it's like I love to mix and match these technologies. So we did a lot of scanning, we did a lot of Gaussian splats, we did photogrammetry. We try to get as much real world, as much set integrity, and of course our synthetic rebuild of this entire environment. And again, challenges, stunts, logistics, safety, etc. The leading in the practical build on stage 24 and Universal, built out the entire stage for this environment. And then again, scanned and rebuilt the entire cube for shots when we needed it. And again, leaned into production and then controlled all the environments and brought all the elements together in a more traditional environment and a more traditional presentation. So a lot of different pieces of the puzzle to come together, but it all did. So yeah, that's my current endeavors in virtual production and virtualization of environments. And with that, give it back to you, Tranel.
Hey, thanks for that presentation, Martin. That was great. Next up, we have Steve Talkowski, the creative director and 3D artist whose career bridges traditional animation, real-time production, immersive media, and emerging AI-driven workflows. Through Sketchbot Studios, Steve has collaborated with companies including Apple, Google, Disney, Netflix, Warner Brothers, and the Jim Henson Company, contributing to projects spanning feature films, streaming content, live experiences, and major product launches. Earlier in his career, Steve worked at Blue Sky Studios, contributing to projects like Ice Age, Alien Resurrection, and the Academy Award-winning short film Bunny. Since then, he's continued evolving alongside the industry itself, working across character design, animation, virtual production, spatial computing, and real-time cinematic workflows. What makes Steve's perspective especially interesting for tonight's conversation is how deeply he operates at the intersection of artistry and emerging technology, from Unreal Engine pipelines to AI-generative tools, VR development, and immersive experiences for platforms like the Apple Vision Pro and Meta Quest. So with that, I give the floor to you, Steve. Let's welcome Steve.
Hey, thanks, Renaud. Thanks everyone for having me be on this panel. It's so exciting to see all your guys' work. It's really amazing stuff. I come from more of a 3D artist, animation director background. What I'll do is I'll show just some of the projects I've worked on over the years, but I have to give a quick little shout for SIGGRAPH because this is the longest running organization I've been a part of. My first record was in 1987 as a student volunteer in Anaheim, and I have a couple little mementos here from my very first SIGGRAPH when I was 21. Character animation from 1987, 1988, and then 1989 course notes. And for those of you who remember Dallas 1990, I've got my little SIGGRAPH Silicon Graphics. Remember that? Little slinky. So I thought I just had to do a little shout out to some of the old nostalgia from SIGGRAPH, which, I've seen a lot of change in industry over the last, God, almost 40 years now. And it's been amazing. I saw the writing on the wall probably like 8 years ago at a Unreal Engine user group meeting in LA, and I just really I need to be part of the whole real time craze, and just started doing the dive into that. And I had already been implementing the low poly, high poly workflow into my pipeline already using Maya and ZBrush and Substance Painter. And then when it came time to start telling stories, it was like, okay, Unreal Engine, I can do this all in real time. So let me just share my screen really quick here, and I'll give a quick little overview of who I am. So I moved to New York when I was in 1994, and where I worked at Blue Sky Studios for many years. working on movies. And then after that, I was directing commercials for a couple different spots. But then in 2007, I decided to go freelance and do my own do my own thing. So I launched Sketchbot Studios, where the name Sketchbot comes from is I designed a designer vinyl toy, which is the big thing I wanted to do. So I did that for 2 years, and then we moved to LA in 2011, where I continued to freelance. I had been approached by the Jim Henson Company to start developing some IP based on my robots. And originally it was going to be pitched as a live action show with CG compositing, but I decided to switch it up and see if we can try to pitch it as a Unreal action show, an Unreal Engine show with motion capture, which I'm not opposed to using, versus keyframe, which I'm typically accustomed to doing. Some of the projects I worked on, if you guys visit my art station, you can see I do a ton of stuff. I'm kind of known as the whimsical robot guy. I was participating in March of Robots and Inktober many years ago, and that's how posting this stuff on my socials is what got me noticed by Jim Henson. They kind of saw this body of work here from the March of Robots stuff, and they were like, "We love how you're integrating stuff with live action." These are just doing plates, so I was like, "Let's do something with them." And over the years, I've done some really cool projects. I got to be a 3D art concept on the Scoob movie with the real effects. So I got to work on some really cool concepting work besides some amazing 2D artists, and then take their ideas into 3D and then present these to the studio. I worked on a really cool project for Apple Vision Pro where I wanted to do a little homage to the original Tron. And Apple had just opened up this feature where you could create like a 3D web environment that's accessible on the Vision Pro. So I did a little loopable animation here. That was kind of fun to present to people. That was kind of a really fun little test that I wanted to try to get out there. It was only a 5.6 megabyte file that also loads up with audio and animation, and it worked really well in headset. So this is being shot from inside headset. I got to do some really cool stuff. A one-off commission for a Riot Games piece, and this was a 3D printed object. But what I wanted to do was it was only meant to be a 3D print, but then I took it a step further and decided to bring it into full animation piece here. So the cool thing about this was, again, how do I get this moving? And Unreal Engine to the rescue. I just was able to go back to my ZBrush model, which is one of the most complicated ZBrush models I've made to date, and convert it to high res, low res using Substance Painter, bring it on my maps, and then bringing it in and setting up the animation. And I also have been trying to get Blender more and more into my pipeline, where I use Blender's hair grooming features to actually do a groom on the character, which was really fun to do. And that was my first time using that. So I got that to work as well. This is a really fun piece in Unreal. I was approached by this NFT company to create a full-blown cinematic. What I did was I did this as a solo dev. So I actually budgeted this out to eight months of work. And I had one thing I outsourced was rigging to a good friend of mine down in Australia who does the Zoo Tools plugin for Maya, and he was able to do the rig for me for the character. But because they all share the same body topology but different accessories, I just had like a switch to have the four different characters. But it was a really cool project to work on, and I learned a lot because I really dove into Unreal because I hadn't done a full-blown cinematic yet. And it turned out great, and I was really proud of how this turned out. And I think they're finally now getting ready to release something. But yeah, good luck to them to try to get something going here. It was a really fun project to be a part of. But again, I couldn't have done this as a solo dev in anything other than Unreal Engine. I also worked with Autodesk to design the new Maya learning channel character M4Y4. That was a fun little project that runs in real time in the viewport. This was some early Sketchbot stuff I had been doing. I actually got a Epic Games Mega Grant years ago to do a VR project. So this is a part of my pitch was showing off a proposal for a museum. Here's some of the group shots of some of the other robot characters I've been working on that are being developed right now for different shows. And then a quick just aside as how I use AI in my work. I was approached to test out Viscom.ai a couple years ago. And when it first came out, it wasn't really too impressive. I kind of like saw it and I let it sit for about a year. And then I saw some of my peers doing some interesting stuff. And so I decided to take a look at it. And I was really impressed with what I could do. For example, you can actually weight your drawings And I do a little time lapse feature to show like how you can actually kind of weight your drawings to do iteration. And this is how I want to use AI moving forward as an artist, is I don't want to hit the create button. I want to use AI as a tool to help me iterate, but keep it tightly onto my original idea and my concept. So I'm not going too crazy, taking the weighting down. I'm trying to keep it pretty close, but giving it a prompt and then kind of guiding it. So I feel like, you just have to be a good art director as you're playing around with AI. And but it's really fascinating. I've been finding that it's been great to take I have a plethora of sketches over the years that I kind of go back in and will just see what I can do. So for example, I'm developing some new of my iPilot character. So this is an original sketch that I did. Then I take it and do a very simple render pass just to kind of get some color to it, and then a slight little bit of iteration to see, okay, like, what some like joint ideation or some other design language. The thing is, there are some ways that you can now train it on your own work, which I'm more excited about, is like go through my body work and see how it can learn from me instead of like, I don't want to go and ape someone else's design language. I kind of want to use my own, but helping me aid in how I see forms and stuff. So that's kind of how I like to use AI right now. I've just started looking into some of the 3D stuff, but I love doing the process. I'm a 3D modeler, and so I love doing the modeling myself. Well, I'm more interested in seeing AI help with the mundane stuff like retopology, UV layout, and even like for 3D printing, I'd like to see things where it's like help me figure out the right orientation for 3D prints based on the resin or the material that you're printing in. I'm kind of all over the page. I like to keep up with the technology. I like to be informed, and I'm really just excited to see how AI is helping us for virtual stuff. Also, 2 shows I worked on as an art director. I got to do the new Yoga Gabba Gabba Land on Apple TV, so I got to work with this amazing team, DNEG and Framestore, and then we did a bunch of. I kind of helped 2.0 the show and did a lot of stuff where I was like building models, concepting it, throwing it right into Unreal Engine, and then an amazing artist was just putting everything together in a scene, and then we throw up on the LED wall and be able to see how we're doing set extensions and kind of bringing that world from just basically like a show shot over a single site to a very volumetric world where we can like take the drone or take the camera and move around the different worlds of Yoga Gabba Gabba. Was really great. And then I did get to do a really cool stint on Pinocchio. So on live action Pinocchio, I got to work with Halon and Mold 3D as a 3D previs artist. And that was pretty cool as well to go ahead and see how much of my assets and scenes that I laid out actually made it from Unreal Engine through to Final Pixel, which is really fascinating to see. So from that point of perspective, I just think it's great to like, use the tools. I'm all in on real time and also on Vision Pro. That's something that spatial computing, using these tools to get stuff over the headset, is something I've been also really passionate about for the last 2 years, and just excited to see where things continue to move from here. Thanks a lot, and I'll hand it over to you, Tranel.
Well, hello. Thanks a lot, Steve. Yeah, fun fact, I also worked on Pinocchio, and we found out about it like, years later. So we did different points of the virtual production pipeline. So yeah. So with that, I'd like to introduce, last but not least, panelist Dennis Serras. He is a creative technologist and visual effects veteran whose career spans feature films, TV, games, and large-scale production systems. Dan is currently the head of creative technology at Artists Anywhere, and throughout his career, he's built tools and workflows that help bridge the gap between artistic vision and the technical realities of modern production. His credits span some of the industry's biggest franchises, including Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Disney, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, The Terminator, and the Call of Duty game series. What makes Den's perspective especially valuable is his focus on solving production complexity at scale, developing systems that simplify workflows, optimize pipelines, and reduce frictions for artists and creative teams. He's also deeply involved with the Visual Effects Society, helping shape the technical infrastructure behind the VFX awards themselves. And with that, I give the floor to you, Dennis.
All right. So thank you, Tranel. And I will throw out as well, thank you to Joan and Aveline. We really appreciate the invitation to this, but I know, Tranel, you're the man behind this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to do something a little different. I don't come from the same world as most of the other folks here. I think you'll hopefully find something a little bit different about what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about virtualization of production itself. So not necessarily the artist tools, but how do we virtualize what is production? I work for Artists Anywhere. Artists Anywhere is a tool set designed to help productions manage all of their production, especially from the studio side. So we host the productions, but we can also manage all of their software, all of their workflows. It's essentially an end-to-end tool set. I'll talk a little bit about it. I'm trying not to turn this into a demo, so hopefully I can make it a little bit more fun. Just a little bit about myself, as Tranel mentioned, I have a pretty varied background. My first jobs were actually in graphic design. I started in desktop publishing back when desktop publishing first began, and kind of worked my way towards becoming a compositor and visual effects artist. But I kept finding myself getting drawn into the problems of pipeline, because the issues of efficiency drive me crazy. So having a tool set that is designed to make production easy is something that I've gotten very involved in. And so what I'm going to be talking about is virtualization of the pipelines themselves. Now, I figured we'd probably have a whole bunch of people here talking about this in a bigger way. I'm not going to focus on it. This is a chart from the VFX and Animation World Atlas showing how much the production of visual effects and animation has spread around the world. It's obviously massive, and where the production studios and where the actual vendors are that are doing the work. As we can see from this graph, it's gone everywhere around the world. So if we look at virtualization from the point of view of even just getting beyond a team of artists all sitting in one room, we now have teams of artists sitting in rooms all over the world. And we had to build infrastructure to make that possible. And of course, since COVID, we've had teams of artists all working from their homes, making it even more virtualized if you take it from that point of view. But I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about the virtual production office. As many of you probably know, especially anybody on here who comes from a production background, often the producers, the coordinators, the guys who are having to manage all of this get the short end of the stick when it comes to pipeline. So what we decided to do was build a set of tools that made it possible for productions to be able to manage the massive numbers of shots that are being generated by the amazing artists who I'm joined with on this panel. So how do we do that? Essentially, keeping this theme of virtual, I'm approaching it from a couple different point of view. The first one is the idea of centralizing. So we have to manage all of this information, and we have to manage it all in a way that is intuitive and that is central, because the siloization of processes makes it very difficult to manage a production in general. So what we're trying to do is bring it all together into a single workflow. File management is often where a lot of that starts for shows, meaning, many people started using tools like Aspera to manage their submissions many years ago. But what we've done is tried to bring in a larger view of all of the workflow of files, everything from end to end. We've heard a few other shows kind of come up, as other people mentioned, and it's been interesting. We were involved with Pinocchio. We helped design a production management system to help manage the back end and the VAD and the build of Pinocchio. We also worked on the Rings of Power. In fact, some of our tools were originally designed for the Rings of Power series, because that series was built both to be very automated and also was done during COVID. We took those same tools and we expanded them out and rebuilt them for Warner Brothers to use on Justice League, for Netflix to work on. I think the first show we did for them was Lost in Space, but we've now done dozens and dozens of shows for all the different studios. Again, trying to solve all of these problems essentially in one tool set. Centralized storage is another major important part of it, meaning everybody can go to the same place to find their files. Obviously, vendors have a slightly separate workflow, but within the production itself, you've got a single location with all files and all workflows, bringing everything together into a single environment. We have our own data center for managing this, as well as we have our own cloud that we use to manage it all. And then a centralized database. I'll show a little bit more in a bit, but essentially what we've done is done a heavy customization of Shotgun. I think most of you are familiar with it by that name. If you're not, it's also known as ShotGrid and now Flow Production Tracking, or Flow PT or FPT, or any number of other names, some of which shouted in frustration in the middle of the night, something that I understand. But we did feel like it was the strongest tool to build around. So we did an enormous amount of rebuilding of Shotgun in order to make it something that we think is not artist focused, but is actually producer coordinator management. So when you're thinking about all of the processes of taking a show from pre-production all the way through post-production, we have a number of tools and pages that are designed to manage that process. But it's also the other part of virtualizing in my brain is not just centralizing, but it's also optimizing, meaning putting all of your data in one place isn't great if nobody can find it. A lot of what I've focused on is how do we optimize the processes? How do we make it better for artists? Before I started working on production side, I was working as an artist, and then and so we're building tools as an artist to make the workflow better for me as an artist, and then eventually for other artists, and then finally for artist teams and whole facilities, to try to create a system that made it possible for artists to be essentially as unfrustrated as possible. My philosophy is that frustration is the enemy of creativity. And so creating a frustration-free environment is a goal. It may be impossible, but it is our goal. So this is a very small flow chart. I have a massive version of this that brings in everything from all different parts of production, but essentially putting it all through a series of systems that's easy for all of the users to understand how to get the data in, how to get the files in, how to bring it all together, how to manage the files themselves. So this is our Cyclone system, which is our current, what we call a 3rd-gen file transfer system. And it's designed in order to manage large volumes of files very quickly, leveraging mostly AWS services, although we have a number of other cloud providers that we work with as well. I'll note that this generation thing is an interesting one because first generation of file management, most of us probably used FTP at some point, which was basically just a folder somewhere in the cloud that we were uploading and downloading files from, and it seemed fine until the second generation came along, like Aspera, which was really optimized for speed. And suddenly FTP seemed terrible. What we tried to do with what we're calling our 3rd gen is actually create something that is equal to Aspera in speed, but is much simpler, is managed more on the back end, and handles large volumes of file transfers, keeping the files together and ensuring integrity all the way through it. And we're actually working now on our 4th gen, which I'll talk about in a sec. And then finally, optimizing our storage. So one of the biggest problems that we have working in, call it a virtualized environment, is managing where the files live, because you want the files where you want the files. You might want the files at your laptop. You might want them on a server. You might want them in the cloud. But the reality is you need them in all of those places at the same time. So what we've done is we've built infrastructure to allow the files to live where they need to live, whether that is within our private cloud, whether that is in the public cloud, because we leverage the public cloud for transferring files, because that's the highest speed environment there is these days, or locally on your computer. And what we do is we manage where those files live within that triangle. Now, let's talk a little bit about use cases. We've worked on largely very, very big shows. As I mentioned, our first major show with Artist Anywhere, what we started calling that was Rings of Power. Before that, we worked on a few shows for Warner. It was kind of our first test case, and on Carnival Row, which I strongly recommend if anybody's has Amazon Prime. It's a great show. So most of the shows that come to us are very, very big shows with thousands and thousands of shots. Stranger Things 4 had like 6,500 shots. Rings of Power, I think it clocked out over 10,000 shots. It's just massive numbers of shots. Because our system is designed for efficiency, we went from a large number of coordinators on our first shows to very, very few now who are able to do all of the work and hopefully going home on time, because that's our goal. We want the process of being a coordinator to be a pleasant one. We want your job to be happy. Even for producers, we've been working on producer workflows to help them manage all of their costs, manage their bids, all of it in a single environment, so that you don't have the frustration of having to make really ugly studio reports. We can build all that for you. So that's been largely the focus of our work over the last few years. We started in 2018. So here we've come, what is that, 8 years later now? And we've built out a very strong presence within these large productions. But what's happened that I think touches on what we're talking about a bit today is we're starting to find clients within a smaller market. So meaning the sort of long tail of small shows that generally don't get to be able to take advantage of this kind of optimization. And we've figured out how to price it now that cloud structure is available, now that we have our own private cloud that's well paid for. We're able to offer really good deals to small shows and independent shows that still need this large that need as much automation as possible, and more importantly, are able to do it from a purely cloud base, meaning that the artists, the supervisors, the pull system, everything is all separate around the world. And a great example of that is the show The Canyon, which will be coming out later this year. They were only 450 shots. They had a little over a month to do it. They had one supervisor, who is the fantastic Emma. Why am I blanking on her last name? It'll come to me. Anyways, the fantastic Emma, love her to death. And she had a part-time coordinator and a part-time VFX editor, and she did the whole show by herself. She QC'd every shot from first pass to all the way to EXR approval, all within the single environment. She did it all from her house and was able to manage all the pulls, was able to manage all the receipts, was able to manage all the reporting, everything that the studio needed, all within a single environment, all by herself, more or less, with some help. And that's kind of something that I think is very interesting about where we're seeing sort of this big concept of virtualization going. Folks were talking about LED screens, and we were involved a bit on Mandalorian on that very first one, and the massive number of people that it took to put that on stage. And now you can see shows that are very, very small that are being able to take advantage of virtual production or LED production anyways. And that's partly because costs have come down, but it's also partly because we've made the process more and more efficient so that it's possible for a small team to be able to take advantage of this really great technology. Now, finally, in the future, I can't talk too much about what we're working about, but because it's pretty excited. What I can tease is our next generation of a file transfer system is called Rex, the Redesign Exchange. Redesign is our parent company, and the Redesign Exchange is designed to, let's just say, unify file management. Our most current workflows are, I'll have, let's say, Lucid working for internal teams, and then I'll have Box, or I'll have Aspera for managing my vendors, and sometimes I'll have a different tool to work with my art department, and then I've got to share files with the studio, and maybe they have a different tool set. That essentially we put it all in a single environment, and it could all be managed with appropriate permissions and appropriate speeds for those people. So if I just need to sync a single file to one person, that's done. If I need to send a package to somebody else, that's done. If I need to sync two servers together, all of that is done within a single system. We're also building out an agent-based workflow, which means that the parallelization of the workflows is increased because you're not limited by simply running something on your computer. And we're working heavily on integrating LLMs, which, at its first glance may not sound that exciting, but when you're able to type into a search engine or into an LLM and say something like, how many shots do I have that are due Friday that are currently in progress from this vendor? And it just spits you out a graph, or it spits you out a chart that shows you exactly what you need to see, and you have confidence in it. That is an amazing thing for being able to get you out of staring at graphs all day, and being able to build workflows that you can use. Just a little bit more about Artists Anywhere. We've worked with, as I say, most of the studios in town. We're heavily trusted. The VFX teams there are familiar with us. If you're interested in working with us, reach out to your VFX team, or feel free to reach out to us directly. Our parent company, Redesign, is a very fast-growing, very strong technology provider that has a number of different services besides Artists Anywhere. We have our own trust and IT services platform. We have a sales platform that is worldwide. Our technology sales team is the best. I will say the reason I started working for Redesign is because when I was the head of technology at a studio and I needed help, they came in and they were by far the best provider that I'd ever worked with. It was a very different experience. So if anybody needs to buy tech, feel free to reach out to us about that. And our system is designed at a cloud level to be able to support workflows beyond just entertainment. Obviously, that's what we're talking about with Artists Anywhere today. Thank you very much. And now back to you, Tranel.
All right. Thanks, Dennis. That was a great presentation. And so, I'd like to, invite all the panelists to turn their cameras on so we can begin the overall general discussion about the virtualization of Hollywood. I guess we can start the conversation off with understanding virtualization itself and the virtual production landscape. When we say the virtualization of Hollywood, what does that actually mean in practical terms for you guys today? Like what parts of the pipeline has changed in the last 5 years, and what's something you think consumers think is solved in the virtual production pipeline, but absolutely isn't? So anybody just feel free to, just take it away.
Well, I think I'll just open it by saying that I've noticed that a lot of people seem to believe that AI is the end all be all, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of fear around it. And I've been getting a lot of this from supervisors and artists. And at Atomic, we kind of have this view that while the ocean may not be as deep in the future, you may find that the bottom of the pyramid maybe isn't as deep. We also believe that this is going to allow for a much wider ocean. You're going to see a lot more work, and in a lot of ways, I think you're going to see more specialized work, and you're going to see more opportunities for more artists to break through because these AIs cannot do it themselves. And I think it's inconceivable to believe that the AI and the artist will be completely separated. I think it's more a case where the AIs are serving as a magnifying glass of sorts. And so, if you're a high performing individual, if you have a lot of ideas, if you have a lot of creative directions that you want to go, AI serves as a magnifying glass for that. And so, I do really believe that it's going to open up a lot of other opportunities. And I'd be interested to hear what the other panelists say because I know there are a lot of differing opinions on this. And, I kind of really stick to the one that this is really going to widen our industry in a lot of ways and make a lot of things possible that just weren't before.
I think
I
it's
pipe in really quickly, coming from a 3D modeler perspective. I can't go a day without these headlines where it's like, "Oh, your job is over. You're out of work," and that's far from the truth because the reality is, people like me are going to end up cleaning up some of the stuff that AI can't do. And even everyone tells me, "Oh yeah, well these latest image to generation models can separate out models and do all this stuff," but they still don't do that. And I've actually had to clean up pieces where people are like, "I did this in AI," and I'm like, "Well, that's not going to work. We need to fix it up for production. It needs to be retopologized and it needs to be re-UV laid out for textures." I mean, there's a lot of stuff where people think they're just going to drop it in and it works, and it doesn't. It might be good for layout and for previs, but for production, it's still not there. And I really think that we should just be using the AI as a tool. It's not a push make art button. That's never going to be the case. You always still need to art direct it, and you still need to guide it. And I think the more you've been in this industry and the more experience you have, you will learn how to use it the right way to help you kind of like help you with the mundane stuff and to continue to be creative, but you're not asking it to do all the work for you. And again, I would never want to just relinquish control, and because then I'm going to lose my creative muscle. Like, why would I want to do that? I'm all about creating in the first place. So I just want to use it as a tool to enable me to get more of my vision out there instead of just sitting back and turning into a Wally character where I'm just, hitting the button and letting it do its thing. That's my rant.
Just really fast, Steve. I just want to ask you a quick question, because I've been hearing this a lot, and I've kind of been repeating this, is AI gets you 80% of the way, right? But that last 20% to really get it production ready and to have it on screen, that requires the artist. Do you think that maybe there's any truth to that? Because I'm very curious to hear what you think.
Well, I think for now it is. I mean, okay, I'm also amazed when I see some of these videos. I'm like going, wow, it's getting closer. It's getting pretty cool, but you can kind of still see where it's like, I wouldn't frame it like that, or I wouldn't do that kind of a camera move. And it's like, you just kind of tell that it again, is this doing what it can, being trained on what we tell it to be trained on, which is stuff that we've already done. So I don't know. I don't, and also before AI, we're using scripting, we're using all these other tools. It's not like we're writing the rendering engine, and I'm not writing the renderer, and I'm not writing. It's like we're using tools that were made to do this stuff. But for example, on this project I'm working on with the Vision Pro right now, I'm using an Unreal Engine build that was forked for Vision Pro, and I'm finally be able to get stuff on the headset. The thing is, I'm not a programmer, and I don't want to be, but I need to learn how to do some VR pawn blueprints because I'm trying to get OpenXR hand tracking from Unreal Engine over to Xcode/SwiftUI, which I don't know how to do. I actually had Claude Code running on my terminal in the Mac, and I was able to sit there and work with it and guide it to be. I'm trying to like simulate virtual thumbstick so I can get like a to provide an out of the box experience without saying you need controllers. How can I simulate a virtual thumbstick? I kind of know what I want. I know some of the terminology, the right way to present it and ask it properly. But then the thing is, like, it starts to hallucinate. I need to start keep it on track. But I'll tell you, man, I was able to get some. I went through like 5 to 6 different iterations of how can I simulate a thumbstick with just my finger pinch and moving around. And I can sit there and work with it and iterate, pop it on, check it out. Okay, no, try this, or and you can talk to it normally. You can say, no, I meant the other direction, or you can just talk to it normally, and it'll figure out. And the cool thing is, I want to learn from it, so I will always do the expand the tap down where you see where it's looking at stuff and it's breaking out how it'll explain to me how it's going to be done. I'd rather learn from the AI that way, like teach me a little bit about what you're doing instead of just like throwing it to me flat. The thing I'm always worried about too is like I don't. Okay, yes, I am doing a little bit of quote unquote vibe coding when I'm doing that, but I'm not vibe coding the whole project. I'm just using it to help me with a blueprint. So I'm totally fine using it in that respect. But also, if I can learn from it as I'm doing it, then I feel like, okay, I'm not just like hitting the button and like let it go do its thing and like, okay, what did it do? If I can look at the code a little bit and understand, yes. So I'm kind of, I think that's how we should be using it, you know?
I think it's worth pointing out that this discussion itself, to answer your question, Tranel, shows you what's happening to virtualization. Basically, AI has become the replacement term for whatever virtualization means anymore. That we've gone from virtualizing call it a facility, to putting it online, to virtualizing model making by putting it into a computer, virtualizing film by putting it into digital, right? And so and virtualizing editing and putting it into a computer, right? So that whole process of virtualization has taken us to now, and what we're essentially saying is we're virtualizing not the artistic process, but we are virtualizing more of the creative process, meaning we're never going to hit the push a button to solve it, but we're getting to the place where I don't need a team of 100 artists to de-age an actor anymore. And yep. I'm not sure what that means in terms of its impact on the industry. It's probably going to mean we're going to have a hell of a lot more de-aging, but it might also mean that we're going to have a lot fewer big studios because you just don't need big studios anymore. So I'm also picturing this idea of virtualization of, I think back on those pictures of Hollywood in the 30s and 40s, and those massive rooms, those huge open rooms of writers and storyboard artists and editors and typists whose job it was to just type copies of scripts. And all of that, it's all gone, right? And where it's gone to is it's gone into a virtual world that is governed by what we can do within our computer. And I think, I'm talking about how we can use LLMs in order to improve the production process. Stephen and Ian are talking about how they can use AI in order to improve the artistic process. I think, and Martin probably has use cases in terms of physical production processes as well. Instead of having to spend a lot of money building a virtual backdrop, you can literally generate something in real time that is useful. So I think the concept of virtualization now is, to summarize, has been taken over by AI, and there's probably nothing we can do about it.
To your point, and it's a little bit banal, but even in the sales office, we're seeing AI make impacts, right? It's tracking who we've spoken to when and reminding us when it's time to ping somebody. And so it's funny how you were saying virtualization has actually made it into literally everything.
Yeah, Martin, did you have anything to add to the conversation for this one?
Oh, no, I just reiterate, yes, exactly. We're trying to do the same thing with our production pipelines, and where I think the big thing is, and we kind of hit on this, is as long as it has that artist feedback loop, as long as it's like you can iterate and then you can make changes and it listens to you. If it's an assistant, not the final arbiter, that's where the magic happens.
Great. And so let's move on to the next topic, the evolution of the pipeline. How have digital pipelines evolved from traditional VFX workflows into fully virtualized production environments? I'm sure you all have your own various perspectives. Like, where are we seeing true end-to-end digital asset continuity from previs to final pixel? And where does it still break? Like, what tools or engines are actually becoming standardized versus just hype? And is real-time actually replacing offline rendering or just shifting where time is spent? And can you give concrete examples from a recent production, or where did the pipeline fail around a require a workaround?
Those are great questions. There's a lot in each one of those. Do you want to pick one to start with?
It's up to you guys. I'm just leaving the floor up to you guys. It's giving you the meat to chew on. So you go ahead, whatever.
I
Which
mean,
one?
the end-to-end digital asset continuity is an interesting one because even before I started at Redesign, we were dealing with that when as virtual production started up with the idea of going from art department to VAD to on stage to post-production. And at every stage, the asset being rebuilt over and over and over again, because the need for higher and higher quality art was overriding whatever was handed to them from the previous stage. And I think many companies have tried to address that by creating essentially final models first, and then just sort of de-resing it or de-poly counting it in order to be able to use it or optimizing to use it in on stage or in previs. But I'm not sure that we've solved it. I don't know that it is solvable because in the end, there is this problem of needing to have something that is specific for a specific workflow. I do wonder, since there's some smart people on here, if we're at a stage where you could create it once at a lower, or call it a medium resolution, an on-stage resolution, and you could use newer tools to upres it without having to completely rebuild it.
Right.
I'll add to
Right.
that. The On one of the shows I worked on, we got constantly heavy CAD assets from the art department, and they all had to be rebuilt to get into Unreal. It just was a matter we couldn't use the CAD data. It was a mess. And so that was a big hurdle that a lot of people we would just have to take a set and just okay, now we got to rebuild it, and then you had to re-UV it to get textures on it. Otherwise, they didn't want to even put anything in front of the director unless it was sitting in a beautiful textured Unreal environment. And that was a huge thing, and that was like probably like 5 years ago. So yes, today you could probably like try to do these image to model type of stuff, and I still think that's good for filler. But if it's a background element or even maybe a mid-ground element, you could probably get by with it. But if it's a hero asset, and it's going to need to be also it has to be rigged and then deformed. That's a whole other story. So you have to kind of pick and choose. You have to just like on any project you work on, you have to break it down and go, okay, what are the use cases for this? And is it just a one-off set or is it going to be used across different scenes? You just have to. I don't see any. I don't see anything doing being a click unless I guess what the term nowadays is called the AI slop, where people are just presenting stuff that was just hit the button and let it churn and let it do its thing without any guidance and just let it do its thing. Yeah, some of those shots are okay, but come on, like let's all be realistic. Like those Coca-Cola spots for the holidays. I can't believe an art director would let those fly as final and they still look like crap. I'm sorry, but it's like, come on, give me a break. And but that there's some artists out there rotoing the Coke logo to make sure it looks perfect, and tracking it. So it's like, like if you're gonna use the tools, use it the right way instead of like putting something out there where people are just gonna be like, oh yeah, that's AI slop. I'm not interested in seeing AI slop. I'm interested in seeing better looking stuff that you use the tool for, it's going to help us make something more even magical, or maybe stuff that would have taken a long time to create and composite. But that's the thing too, is like if you have to iterate, you're screwed. How are you going to iterate on something that was just that's pre-rendered once? That's the whole big thing. We need to be able to edit and recomposite, and we need to have layers. So I don't know. It's Are those tools going to get better? We'll see.
You asked the question about standardization, Chanel, and I think, the world took 20 years to standardize on Maya and Blender and Houdini, and whereas 20 years ago, every studio had their own 3D tool set. And I think and you can go further back and talk about compositing tool sets. I think it's going to be a while before the dust settles on the new tools, and whether or not Comfy UI will still be around in 10 years is a very, very open question. I think the fact that we are in a very Wild West stage right now is great for those of us who enjoy the experimentation of us, and sucks for those of us who've been doing what we do for 40 years and we're hoping to retire. Because I feel like I work in a film lab and it's 2005 and the first digital cameras are coming out. The Sony F900 is shot on episode 2, and I'm going, Nah, I'll be fine. You know what I mean? And I do wonder about there may be many folks on this call who are similarly wondering about what is my future. And and it's very facile to say, well, embrace the new tools. When the reality is that the new tools aren't even that embraceable. Anybody can go into Gemini and generate an image, but that doesn't necessarily talk about how you use it in a workflow. And, when the studios are downsizing around the world, where do you have the opportunities to to follow these new tools down wherever road they're going to take us?
Yeah, but isn't it kind of exciting in a way? And I take a little bit of an oppositional view on this because when I started producing, the 5D Mark II had just become a thing. And so I remember the older generation telling me, you're not making film and you're never going to make film and digital is never going to happen. And I remember embracing the 5D Mark II. And then I just remember the day that the Alexa came out. And there were directors who I had worked for, and I mean classic directors. Greg Weinshanker, the guy who did I don't want to grow up, but if I did Toys R Us Kids stuff, right? Very classic guy. He did Kodak, and it actually won him over. And I kind of feel like we are in that moment again. And I get it. For some, it may be difficult to transition and to keep up, but I think especially for younger people and artists coming in, this is such a prime opportunity to kind of lead the pack and maybe redefine just like digital did. It's just, I don't know. I think it's so exciting, Dennis.
I don't disagree, and I want to make sure because Martin looks like he's got something to say too. But I think we have to just be realistic and know that we're embracing both worlds. If I were a film student right now, I would be so excited because I can work for dirt poor and I can experiment with all these tools and I can create films and create something really cool and interesting. But I know many, many VFX artists and others who have been working in this industry, grips and lighters, and who've been working for forever, and who are looking at, if not their industry going away, having to learn new tools at a much lower price point than what they were hoping to have. And I think we just have to recognize that that's the world that we have to embrace. It's both of those truths.
Yeah, I think both of them working together and embracing that. I know like many production designers are terrified, but many are embracing digital technology and mixing and matching those disciplines and where they make the most sense. And it's all about performance, story, and how it interacts with talent. The weird thing is, I still see like you're right. Everything is evolving as it will, but I see these rhythms of, oh, rear projection is back, but it's an LED, or it's a front projection now. And it's like no, it's all these things like these bigger aspects of production. It's like the media is slightly different, but the same conceptual way that you deal with it as a creator has these weird rhythmic repeats, and I find that really interesting. It's just like I remember, front projection back and starting coming out in the 90s and stuff. And that's pretty cool. And then, you see Nolan do it on a front projection. It's like, oh yeah, they're doing the front projection. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty easy in camera comp. And you go from the old school model days when I started in model miniatures and stuff. Well, it's the old kit bash. Well, there's similarities with that with reiterating random AI iterations of like what do you hobble these pieces together. So I guess there are some very interesting commonalities, and yes, many things will change. I think it's just what has value and what can you interact with and drive creatively, and where those intersect.
Oh, yeah, those are all great insights. Yeah, that's great. So the next topic we have is asset encapsulation and interoperability. Like, how close are we to fully encapsulated digital assets that persist across the entire production lifecycle? Like, are we building reusable asset ecosystems, or do they still project by project silos? And what's the biggest blockers to interoperability between tools like Unreal, Unity, and traditional VFX pipelines?
Hmm.
And then this whole ecosystem, who owns the asset in the virtual production workflow, the studio, the vendor, or the platform? And then is the industry moving towards open standards or still staying in walled gardens?
Tranel, let me just give a quick answer on that, and then I'll let the others take over. But I've experienced walled gardens. Everyone is very, very, very protective of their intellectual property, and the studios especially. What's very, very important to them is a closed ecosystem. And Amazon, they have their 900 legal points right now when we're using AI, especially, and it is called the 900 points. And our legal team has to go through all 900 of them and work on the verbiage. And one of the most important things is that the assets they are sharing with us and anything that we train on stays internal, does not get used on anything external, does not get reused, does not even get reused by us. And so I think that legal is a very big hurdle. And I will say, everybody is waiting, or at least the executives I've spoken to from the executive perspective. We are all waiting for that first big legal case. We're waiting for that first time that Disney or Amazon, nobody wants to be it, but we're all waiting for it because it really has to be litigated. Who owns what can be shared? What assets can you use? Can you even use stuff coming from the internet? And I know ownership and trail of ownership is very, very big. I know Disney especially has very stringent restrictions, and they pretty much all do. So in a way, at least from the executive perspective, I've seen this walled garden, and it seems like the walls are getting bigger and bigger as people want to protect their corner.
I'm not going to say the opposite of you on everything,
Yeah, please, no, take the opposite.
but I am actually going to say I think you're right. First of all, that the studios by necessity are doing that because now anybody can create art that looks just as good as somebody at WB can, But I think the an interesting oppositional force of that is that a lot of the new tools are open source. And a lot of it is being created by people who are outside the traditional, call it walled gardens of Weta and ILM. And I think there will still be people who are sort of Magnopuses of the world who are creating really interesting, cool proprietary stuff, leveraging brand new technologies and sort of filtering it in. But I think there's going to be a lot more stuff happening outside of those businesses as well. That's a lot more open. Folks like Corridor Crew who are creating tools and putting them out for the world. I think that it's an interesting. It feels a little bit like early internet. Remember when everybody was putting everything on the internet for everybody, and it was a great place to be. And it was also full of lots of weirdos and predators, and but we don't talk about that. And I think that's kind of what it feels like right now is that there's this, there's a lot of people who are walling off, as you said, but I think interestingly, there's a lot of people who are creatively trying to put tools out into the world for other people to be creative.
Fair, fair.
I'll go ahead and add something to the asset integration. And this hits on the open source. So USD, right? This is going to be the golden standard moving forward. However, which flavor of USD? Because I will tell you the pain points I've been having for the last 2 years trying to get stuff over the headset for Vision Pro. Like I want to be Apple compliant. So let me make sure I'm Apple compliant. But I've discovered a couple bugs in how some of the nodes are exported from, say, if you're going to do a whole USD asset from Substance Painter. And I actually caught this bug. I'm like, am I the only one who saw this? I reported it to the Open Alliance for USD, and then Apple wants to say one thing, and then Autodesk wants to say something, and Adobe wants to say its own thing. But it's like, is anyone going to fix this? And to this day, it's still like I'm trying to use Blender now because if you want to use USD in Maya, they want you to create a USD stage, and then you got to have access to Material X. And it's like, so are we using this new standard, or what are we using? I find that Blender, at least, I can have assets in there I can make in Maya, bring them over to Blender, and then export from Blender's BXDF file shader, and know that they're going to come in compliantly into Reality Composer Pro or whatever I need to use. So that's a big hurdle. We're still using FBX just to get basic stuff back and forth, into Engine, either Unity or Unreal. But yeah, I would just say that we're still, I think we're still not going to have like a one format to rule them all, and that we still have too many formats to deal with. I mean, I even saw some reference to like a KTeX file. I'm like, what KTeX is that still being used? It's like, how do we even write a KTeX file? And the thing about with like developing a Vision Pro is a lot of times I love Apple, and it's a love-hate relationship. Like they do a great job with the dev stuff where they post all the great. You can download it, you can compile it, and you can test it out. But what they don't do is they don't go into the nitty gritty and show you like, how did you bake that out? What tools did you use to bake that? Because like, for example, I never used backlighting because I was always doing raster images for commercial and film. But when I started doing real time stuff, then I had to start learning about backlighting. And to this day, it's still a really hard thing to do. Like Unreal is, you're kind of spoiled in Unreal because that's what they do under the hood. You have a texture atlas, but you have all your instant modular pieces, but then you have to have your second UV layer that everything gets baked out to, right? Try to do that in Maya or Blender. It's not trivial. It's a whole thing. And I'll tell you, man, I'm like, I tend to waste a lot of my time having to put on the technical hat and then like do the search on Google. That's why at least with AI, I can ask Claude, hey, can you kind of go and do the scrape for me and find something? And then instead of me having to go watch 10 different videos to find the one little nugget I could find, at least that's another way I like to use AI as my assistant is like, hey, just type in something. Hey, I'm having an issue with this, and it'll kind of go through and try to aggregate all the stuff that I need to learn. So again, it's just like, a lot of pain points, but let's see if AI can help us learn how to, learn and go through all those hoops.
I'm curious for Martin. One of the questions that Tranel asked about is, going back and forth from game engines to VFX pipelines. And I'm curious if you guys have played it all with tools like Chaos Arena that are, meant to be able to keep you inside of visual effects workflows and not have to translate to game engines, or if you guys are still focusing or still by necessity having to use all game engine stuff.
We have played with the chaos solutions, but we mix and match technologies a lot, and I've done this also on other shows where we'll go out and so here's a good case scenario. It's like, okay, we need a long dialogue sequence at dawn at the top of a building, and there's stunts and there's crying and action, a whole 9 yards. So like it's the perfect case scenario for virtual production. And of course, so we go out and shoot high res plates of a whole cityscape, but we want cloud simulations. We want, it's going to run long, so we want to send some stuff. Why not use the engine? So we are mixing and matching those technologies and using it all together. So it just depends on the situation. It's funny because I see these technologies moving both ways. I hear the pitch today where, okay, what if we started with a high-end 3D render and then we make it into a volume or a splat, and then now it can work in Nuke in real time for a light performance. So it's like you're deconstructing it just for performance purposes, and it's still going to look good, but it's super light now. So it's like again, it's just like I think the thing comes down to per use case. Like how do we need to use it, and how is it going to work the best? But yeah, we mix and match the technologies all the time, but we are using complete volumes as well, like scans as well, Gaussian splats as well for environments also. So it's an interesting time, and it just keeps evolving. But I think again, it's the right case for the right reason. I think there's never going to be a huge amount of unity. I agree with the solutions just because there's so many different uses and use case. I've also had the other way of working where I'm really working actually for the purposes of a game in narrative storytelling. So it's like you're rethinking it of like, okay, so what do we use, game assets, and how is that going to work? And can we mix and match some of these other, production assets with it? So I've done it the inverse where it's, game telling in the cinema story, and bringing that back out to the filmic world. But yeah, no, I think, but right now, these real-time technologies are great. We much of our stuff is photographic. I looked at a 17K flyover yesterday on the front projection system. It looked fantastic. But again, it doesn't preclude the fact that we could compile, have simulations built into it if we need to. Clouds floating and drifting there that are all game engine solutions. That's where we've done it thus far in terms of mixing and matching.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all great insights. Yeah. So the next area I'd like to talk about is a real-time virtual production reality check. So like, where do these production systems actually do better than traditional filmmaking today? And where is it being overused or misapplied? Some people get tired of seeing quote unquote AI slop when, they just see the minor imperfections of the uncanny valley that still exist. Like, are LED volumes in real-time environments reducing costs or just shifting them? and what roles are disappearing and what new roles are emerging? And do you think virtual production is being oversold?
Yeah, a lot there. Well, I think so. Again, it's really about commitment. It's like if you really have a storyteller who knows exactly the direction you want and is going to be committed to it, then that makes sense. I mean, I will certainly shy away from people to productions to avoid things if there's any question of how they do it. We fix a lot of this poor choices, technical errors, so there's huge downsides. Really, the biggest one is committing, and we know we're so used to our flexibility and iteration of in post and comp, that you have to really think of it as upfront as production design, and really being that committed to it. And really where you could, really lean into the strength of it, an actual production designer being very much more, strong and committed to what they want to see and get that in front of the creatives and say, this is really what it's going to be. I mean, there are cases where you can make some certain changes, but you just, if it makes sense, if it's a continuing asset, if we're coming back to it often and it has to perform, let's just say, or evolve and not just be a static, image, then it makes a lot of sense. Or of course, depending on the foreground imagery, is it metallic, reflective? I mean, I've had these scenarios where it's like, here we are on a deck and everything's chrome. Everything you're seeing off of it, ideally is going to be a reflection. So why the hell not? Or it's a plane with chrome and glass and goggles and all that stuff is refracted and reflected, which we know is horrendously challenging in comp and just a lot of work. So I think if it makes those hits those perfect use case scenarios, fantastic. I'll give you another one. Stunts all the time. I've been in so many situations where you're up on 40 feet on a deck where only so few actors could get in there. They want a medic to be present. It's 95 degrees with humidity in Louisiana, and people are saying, "Why the f are we doing this? Why the f are we here? This sucks." So, and it's like, yeah, and and everything off the deck you see has to be effective for storytelling anyway. Like, thank God for virtual production for these kind of scenarios then, because like it's so much better, safer, faster, and just more effective because you really are going to rebuild much of that world out there anyway. So it just makes so much more sense. It encapsulates a better environment. I've on the other end of the spectrum, I've been in 4 a.m. in 30-degree weather in the middle of nowhere, trying to create a reality out in the middle of a location. So everyone freezing their butt off and saying, "Tell me about that virtual production again. That sounds really cool right around now." As people are bundling up with coffee and blankets, saying, "Let's get out of here. Let's finish the shot and go." So yeah, I mean, there's great use case scenarios for it. I mean, it just has to fit. And yeah, everyone has to be on the same page. Everyone has to commit to it up front and just embrace it. And it works excellent in that regard.
It's funny that you say that, Martin, because when I moved over into VFX from commercials, virtual production, the stages were becoming just the thing. And so I had to go on all these tours and I'm looking at it, and having come from physical production, my opinion on it is, and it still holds firm, the use cases are there. In some cases, it's really important. There are also some cases where, shooting practical it's just the way to go. There's nothing like being on location.
Yeah.
And so I think virtual production in that capacity, very much use case oriented. But like you said, 100-degree day, you're fighting with the elements. In those situations, you save money, you save time, but you also have to know, I think, like you said, there's not a lot of flexibility. You have to know what you're doing going into it. The director has to be committed to it. And, you don't necessarily get the flexibility of the director being able to change his or her mind in the moment. And so limitations, right? The pros and cons.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of preparation needed for virtual production. I find the massive build out and virtual production stages should be an industry benefit, meaning cost should come down. Although I think there's a minimum needed to just finance the cost of the stage and the screen and the work that goes into it. But I think what hasn't necessarily filtered out yet is the cost of preparing to do virtual production. It's like if you're doing it Mandalorian style, where you're truly building out, having a full VAD team, that gets very expensive very fast. Essentially, you got a whole second art department working for you. What I think is interesting is, are we getting to a point where I remember talking to, oh, I forget her name, but she was the VFX producer on Bullet Train, and they really wanted to use LED screens for the
Right.
windows, and they couldn't because the cost was too high. They needed one that could wrap around the window so that if they shot from this side and from this side, they could still see it. And the cost was just too high. Plus, they'd have to build out, the actual backgrounds, although it obviously in that case, it's just stuff flying by really fast. It's not so bad. And the theory that I wonder about is, are we going to see something like the first time I saw a green screen on Grey's Anatomy in like, I don't know, 2010 maybe? It was, or earlier. It's like, well, why is Grey's Anatomy doing, because you could see it, you could tell looking at a window shot that it was green screen. It's like, why is Grey's Anatomy doing a green screen? And it's because they decided it was cheaper for them to be able to manage their show with green screen out the window and throwing in backdrops, and the quality was fine relative to what they were trying to do. And I feel like we might get to that point with LED screens where they're small enough, they're portable enough, they're simple enough. You could build a house on a stage with an LED screen and have really great dynamic, interesting backgrounds out the window. Kind of like what we're doing now with cars, right? We've got dedicated stage for cars that lets you do anything with a car, which is amazing. You can put it in any environment and have reflections all over it. And it's in camera, which means the quality is much higher than what you get with green screens. And I think I'll be very interesting to see if these LED stages manage to stick around long enough for, the sort of the industry to adopt it for more use cases, if you will. And again, AI might help with that as well, because you might be able to generate your backdrops a lot faster.
I'll add a couple just experiences. Like the last time I worked on some really cool spots for commercial work when I was at Hornet about 23 years ago. And it was so cool being on set, but we would board the hell out of everything and pick our angles so we knew what we were building. And we did a couple outdoor shots as well. Like we did a big cool spot from BMW where it was an all traveling, following a car, but having to make sure that, to keep on telling the director, hey, I need some extra space for the characters that are flying around. You have to, but we didn't have previews at the time. I was using Maya though to kind of like block out cameras and sit with the live action director to show what I wanted. And then fast forward to like, okay, I got to work on the Yo Gabba Gabba stuff, and that was amazing because we're going from a single camera psych show to like, okay, now we can start planning to move the camera and go up and around this world, and you can sit there and put your set together pretty quickly in Unreal, and then sit with the directors and go, okay, here's what you need to build out, and here's where we're going to seamlessly match. And I was really amazed how well we were able to hide where the virtual started and doing the set extension. It was really eye-opening, and I was like, yeah, okay, so I can see the cost coming down for that, but then you're right, then you add the whole cost of doing the VAD, which is a whole other thing. So I don't know, compared to like doing a live action stuff years ago versus now doing the VAD, I don't know if it evens out or not, but I just think it's two different ways of working, but you still need to do a lot of pre-plan and upfront. I think there's a lot of boarding that needs to be done to make sure you're planning all your shots. But I think the benefit of doing it virtually is that you can really get in, especially with a VR headset. You can get in and you can do your location scouting right there live in a set and go, okay, let me move that wall over here, or I know that I'm gonna move the camera here. I can just hide that wall. So you're kind of doing it all virtually. I just think there's a lot of cool uses for it. I do see that there was like that when Mandalorian did come out, there was that little thing where people in the know, if you're watching this, you get kind of like it all felt like these shots were kind of contained in sets. It didn't seem expansive, and I think you kind of we kind of saw that a little bit. But then it's like, and then when Andor came out, I was blown away because like I knew they were still using it, but they were trying to do a lot more on set stuff, and then continuing with set extensions and the traditional stuff. So I think it's like again, like maybe some shots you would benefit from a virtual stage, and some other ones let's not do it. So I think, again, it's like, what can we afford to do versus also like stylistically a decision. Let's not do it, or let's do it because we want that look, or we want to be able to give that kind of expanse to something that would just be impossible to do live.
A kid show seems like the perfect use case for an LED screen, meaning like you'd be shooting it, as you said, in front of a psych. And here you can reuse backgrounds, you can do all kinds of really cool stuff. And you can be really creative, and you can, I'm curious, how much did you guys take advantage of interactivity with the backgrounds? Like, was it all pre-built and they were just playing in front of it? Or were there like, I saw one where there was a big kid behind him, and I was curious if that big kid was actually on the LED screen. So there was a real-time composite of a kid with a camera over here being projected up here, and they're interacting with each other.
I don't know that for a fact because I wasn't involved with that part of it, but I'm sure that I think there were times when because the main characters that are in costume, they're on set acting in front of a practical, but then they can move around and as they're moving, the camera's tracking them and you can see the screen updates to the virtual. So it was like a set extension that they were able to like walk. The whole thing was like they were never able to go to different lands. You'd have to just do a cut to another shot. But here, like they could actually have the camera can move from like one Fufu land to Roby land, and you can see the transition as they go over, and it's seamless. And you're like, oh my God, they're actually walking. And of course, you only had like a certain amount that you could walk because their stage was like it wasn't a full 180. It was like it was like maybe like a 120 or something. But you could actually walk, and we would design the paths and stuff so they can walk a distance, and the camera could track them. That was the coolest thing, seeing the camera tracking and seeing it update. It just
Yeah.
was, it was amazing. And like, um, unfortunately, because of how the production worked, I never got to go to the soundstage to see it because they shot in Utah, and they were going to do something set up here in Burbank, but then they did it in Utah, and I couldn't go, so I would just have to see all the footage. But we had dailies all the time. I was like watching stuff happen, and I was tight with the main Unreal Engine operator, so I would always like be giving them assets like, hey, let's try this, because we were trying to help guide everything was just like these cards, but we're like trying to dimensionalize stuff for them, so it kind of still felt like the world, but it was like you can move around something when you do these overhead shots. They're not just like these like post-it notes, but they're volumetric. So that was a whole nother challenge. So like they were afraid of it looking too game like, but like because okay, yeah, we're using a game engine, but we can light it, we can do bake light, we can do all this stuff. So it's just exciting to see this stuff come to life, virtually.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. So the next topic is the creative impact of storytelling. Is it empowering or hindering directors? Like, are directors gaining more control or becoming dependent on the technical teams? Like, does real-time integration improve creativity or lead to decision fatigue, the paralysis analysis? Like, are we at risk of homogenized visuals due to shared tools and assets?
Hmm.
That's actually a very good question. Um, I would argue they're probably getting more control. It seems to me like they're getting a lot more options. And that's the conversations that I'm hearing sort of on the executive level. And that's really what's kind of selling it, I think, to the studios a lot of times, is giving these directors a lot more options. I think the dress that I had mentioned very early on in my presentation is one example. They were locked into this thing and they were stuck. And had this been 3 years ago, that's it. I mean, you either do reshoots and it's going to cost you a huge amount of money, or using the virtual tools that are available now, you change it. And I think it gives more options because a mistake, or what is arguably a mistake, can now be corrected. And there's so many times that you can sort of change things directionally now. And I think in ways that can be good. And it's funny, there was an executive I met today, and they said, I'm not going to say which one, but they said that the fear is that they may be giving too many options now, and that the directors are just going to shoot things out knowing that everything can just be changed. And that creates a whole slew of new problems.
Great point.
Yeah, that's a valid point because yeah, if it doesn't matter, it's just a big void of we'll figure it out in post. Yeah, which is always like I think that's just the worst case because it just affects the storytelling and just the veracity of the performance much more than anything else. It's just really not the best case scenario.
I think about there's kind of two directions that directors seem to go, especially for big shows. And one is I remember when previs first really took off. Like I remember, I think it was Third Floor had a demo of it was essentially a shot by shot comparison of from Star Trek, the JJ version, and how they basically did a whole sequence and they shot it almost exactly what they previs. So there's obviously an enormous amount of creative process that went into the previs, like the very creative people, very technically capable, really great like design and lighting and everything. But essentially they just rebuilt what they did in previs, which probably saved them an enormous amount of money, and made a lot of sense for the kind of work that they were trying to do. And then there's the directors, kind of the, the let's figure it out on set type directors. And, those directors have always been hamstrung on working on a visual effects project. And you'll see a really great director who gets thrown into something that requires the sort of the opposite, the locking it down workflow, and they have a lot of trouble. And I am very curious if the new tools will make it at least a little bit more possible to discover on set. I mean, I know that AI is going to change relationship with actors to some extent, but I really believe that maybe it's because I come out of a theater background, but that so much of the best work is done when you're discovering with your actors on set, when you've actually got people and they're figuring things out and you're changing things on the fly because somebody has an idea and they just want to try it and they're listening to each other and they're reacting to each other and something really cool happens that doesn't fit your storyboard. And it's very difficult to do that when you're not, just shooting a back and forth in a room, right? The minute you introduce something that requires visual effects, it makes it very difficult to have that kind of environment. And I'm very curious if the new tools will make that more possible. I remember shooting my thesis film in 2002 on a green screen, and my actors going, "What am I going to look at? What am I going to see?" And so I'm describing what they're going to see, and I'm saying, "Please look out in the distance and imagine this world that you're going to see." Whereas now, you can put an actor in an LED stage, and you could be like, "Turn around, look at that." I mean, really, look at that. You can see it. That's amazing. And you can get a performance out of an actor that reflects the environment in a way that we couldn't back in the old, days of 300 and Sky Captain and everybody trying to sort of imagine this world that we didn't know what it was going to look like. But the question is, can it get to the point where you can really improvise on a set and be able to get off script and do something capable with that LED screen that you couldn't do otherwise?
It's funny you say that. Spontaneity is key to creativity, I think, especially because I do come originally from an acting background. And I know that some of the best things are the most unplanned. A brilliant light bulb goes off. So that's actually a really good perspective.
I'll add one quick thing from experience. So whenever I was shooting commercials, I'd always board, and I would try to do as much previs as possible. But when I did that cinematic for in that Unreal project, I did want to show the client because we had to stick to a strict schedule and budget. So I said, here's what we're gonna be able to do in about 30 to 40 seconds of what you guys want to do. But I said I kept it a little bit open, like here's the idea of what I want to do. But I think once we get the environment built, because I haven't built the environment yet, it was all built from scratch. So once I built it, then I was able to go in and start, okay, I want to do this kind of shot instead of just a lock off here. And I want to be following the van going down. I was able to go in there and go, oh my God, there's so many things that I felt like my animatic sucks. It's like, I want to go back now and redesign stuff because I'm seeing what I want and I can like adjust my environment a little bit and go, okay, maybe I put the final building where they have to go over there and I make this little path where we have to turn around. That gets a little bit more, I can see more of the environment. So I think that empowers you to like, oh wow, and now I can have these happy accidents and go, oh, wait a minute, I can see what's going to happen and plan for that. So I know, that's where I get excited with especially working as a solo person for the last many years. It's like I can start getting this vision out by using these tools. And like the sky's the limit. Like how much do you really want to try to do on your own? You can now. You can now. The thing with AI is like there's some things I would love to like. Oh my God! Like I see people like running these filters through stuff to like give it a little bit of a difference. I'm like, that's cool, but I kind of need it to be on the texture level where I can like edit it and then apply it to something instead of having just apply to the whole final frame. So that's kind of like, I don't know if we're there yet for integrating that stuff, but yeah, it's empowering.
Yeah, somebody in the chat was just kind of bringing that up and talking about how, where we are, I think, using AI as a perhaps an overly broad term to talk about a lot of things that we've been doing for a very long time. And now we're generating final picture in a way that might be new, but so much of what we've been doing is really leveraging a lot of this workflow that especially at the studios that can afford doing really great machine learning. But I think that what is changing is the ability to make it, I hate using the word term democratizing because it doesn't feel right in this case because it's not, but maybe making it more widely available anyways, for people to be able to do things that they required higher end tools. I mean, imagine trying to relight a shot even 10 years ago, what you would have to have done, even like 2 years ago, what you would have had to have done. And now you can relight a shot. They're not perfect, but it's not bad. And it will get better.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah, those are all great insights. Yeah. So we are running a little short on time, so let's start to wrap things up before we get to the Q&A with some closing rapid fire insights. Like what's one thing you think the industry is getting right, what's one thing it's getting wrong, and what's prediction over the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, well, one thing that I think the industry is getting right is the actually embracing of this new technology. And I have seen it, and I have to give hats off to Amazon. They sort of led the charge with a lot of this technology and sort of pushing it and pushing their executives to kind of push that down. And that has caused Netflix and Warner Brothers and Disney and a lot of the others to move along and begin to embrace things that could have taken a very long time. So I have to say, the speed things are moving is great. I think where we're kind of getting it wrong is we're all waiting for this legal battle to happen, and I think that it is in some ways creating an artificial delay. And I think that there are competitors in other markets where they don't quite have the same stringent laws that we have. And I think that we risk falling behind in some of those cases. And so I really hope that things can move forward. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see some major changes in the industry. I know that when my boss discusses what our company is going to look like, we expect that it is actually going to be much smaller, but with significantly more volume. But the people that we have in some ways will be far more individually important and have a lot more creative control. And so I would say for the people watching, especially if you're a student and you're watching this, you've got to be creative and you have to be artistically sound, I think, in this new world that we're going into. I think that's going to make you very valuable.
Great.
I will double what Ian just said, but also do not forego the infrastructure of your learning, because you still you don't want to be hitting the button and create with that. You still need to have all the tools that you learn when you go to art school or film school or whatever. You need to have that. As far as where I see the next 3 to 5 years go, I think one of the exciting things that's happening right now is the Gaussian splats. I'm seeing some amazing stuff being done where instead of just doing photogrammetry, you can actually take 3D models and generate splats from that. And I'm actually working with another developer right now to help beta test some stuff with assets I give them, and I'm seeing some amazing things. But also video splats. That's going to be the big thing. Where I've seen some examples now where they're able to take video footage and do the solve, so you can do the solve around the whole character. I think AI is helping to try to solve what you can't see. But I think if you have multiple imagery and it's video, that's a whole other game-changing type of thing. Just look it up online. It's all over my feed. But yeah, splatting I think is going to be a big thing we're going to be seeing in the next 3 to 5 years, and how that's going to be integrated into things like the real-time engines.
Yep.
I
I
think
just I just close out with a lot of this technology is going to help us to make things more efficient and financially efficient and cheaper. But the importance is always going to be engagement. I mean, with the way things are going in Hollywood, it's got to be cheaper, faster, but also just it has to hit the audience. So really just focus on the importance of, is this the right choice? The artistic choices we're talking about, is this going to resonate with the audience? That's what's most vitally important.
Yeah, I think right and wrong from an industry point of view is a very difficult thing to look at because the industry is shrinking right now. And, it's very easy to say, well, we were doing great 3 years ago. The industry has destroyed us. But, I think that there was an inevitability to that because they were, where the industry was trying to build up streaming as quickly as possible. We just can't be in that world anymore. So I don't know that I necessarily blame the studios for the way things are now and the fact that we're going to see probably more consolidation. I think it's kind of just the way the world is. I think what the industry or entertainment as a whole may be getting right is expanding beyond sort of the expected work, right? It's like Marvel managed to create an amazing run of about 10 years. And then since then, they haven't had the same kind of power. And the question is why not? Is it because their work isn't original? I mean, they've certainly had lots of new things, and they've had shows that really took chances. So I think the question is maybe it is one of finding new ways of telling stories, not just telling the old stories again, with new technology, sort of remaking endlessly the same work, but actually remaking it or retelling it completely. I mean, Romeo and Juliet has been told a million times and will be a million times more. But the way that it gets told that is resonant with a new generation might be with new tools, it might not, but it's going to be a new story for that new generation. And that's kind of what has to happen. And I'm hoping that you know this change in structure that we're seeing right now and maybe the opening up of the industry to new players is actually going to create kind of what we saw in the early 2000s with the indie boom. We saw so many great people, so many great stories, and many of those great directors and writers went on to do big budget movies that were unique and interesting, and because they came out of a new place, or even going back to the 70s with what happened in the 70s during what was arguably a downturn for the industry, created the biggest upturn the industry ever saw because they embraced new storytelling. So my hope in 3 to 5 years is that, those new forms of storytelling will engage new audiences. And my kids and the other people's kids out there look at that stuff and are excited by it. Like the way that Arcane took hold, I think is a really important lesson. Not copy Arcane, but look at, this story that's from a video game, that whatever. They built an incredible universe and told it in a beautiful way that was, yes, way too expensive. It may never be repeated again, but it did it in a way that I'm astonished at the number of people who have come across who've watched it, because it was just something that resonated and was told in a really beautiful way. And hopefully we're going to see a lot more of that.
Great, great. Yeah. So let's move to the Q&A to wrap this up. It starts off with Ian. What tools are you using for face replacement?
So that unfortunately I cannot go too much detail into that, and let me give a good explanation as to why. There's a bit of an arms race going on right now with the VFX companies and with the tools that we're using and the AI processes. So I do have a little bit of a rope around my mouth in how I can describe very specifically what we're doing. What I will say is that there are a lot of proprietary tools that are being developed by a lot of the top VFX houses now, us included, and that a lot of these proprietary tools are helping to push this arms race forward. And I think in a way that is kind of what's going on. Think of it like I explained it to a friend a couple days ago. I'm just old enough to remember the end of the Soviet Union and those silly little nuclear missile drills in Miami when I grew up. They say stand under your desk and you're going to survive, right? Go under your desk. I think that we sort of have a version of that going on right now, and I think the tools are changing very quickly. And I think that the top VFX houses are working to design proprietary tools that give us an edge to ensure that we survive what is coming.
All right. So next question. Martin, why did you choose front projection over virtual projection for your stage?
Oh, we use both, but meaning the LED technology as well as front projection? Well, I mean, so a couple things. One is that, these projectors, you can get closer to them. They won't moire, the most traditional, bottlenecks of LED technologies. Um, and the scope and size, God, we can cover a huge expanse, and the cost is much more effective. So we still use both. But yeah, the front projection, that technology is here again, and working very well with our Christie solution, and it can be huge and hugely scalable. So it's great. The footprint on the stage also could be small, quite small. You're not taking up panel size, and building out that volume there from there as well. Also, the black point is quite good. So color rendition is also great with it as well. It doesn't mean like, again, there's good case scenarios for an LED as well, but again, we're using both.
All right, great. I think this next one's for the group. What's the best cameras for creating 3D GS? I'm assuming that's Gaussian splash.
I don't know the manufacturers, but I can tell you that there's a couple of folks in the VES who love to talk about the cameras and what they shoot with. So you could check out ISS and their partners. What's Jess's company?
Global Objects.
Yeah, they will tell you all about the cameras, and you can actually see the work that they do with them. So if you want to see them in real time and you happen to be in LA.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a couple other people who've done arrays of cameras, and again, it's you can use off-the-shelf technologies. It just depends on how you want to solve it. For even 40 Gaussian video captures like you're talking about as well. So yeah, all very doable. Depends on how you process it. I mean, I'll on set use my smartphone and get very usable assets. It's just like, hey, this prop needs to perform in post, and I'll just grab it. Why the hell not? There's times where I'll send out a team, and there's times where like, you know what, they're interacting with this, or this would be really good to recreate for lighting purposes. Let me just scan it, and I'll just get what I need, make it work with a simple smartphone.
Yeah, nice. I have someone who says, I see two main areas of AI for film: one, production logistics, classic agentic AI tools, and two, VFX pipeline, not just AI diffusion, etc., generation, but parameterized pipelines of tools to build scenes, cameras, camera paths rendering. Does that jive with panel views?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's well said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the problem is that there's also things like people using AI to generate story and to generate scripts and to generate final image. And, so I think we always have to blend the idea that, we come at it from an artist's perspective, and we believe that a human is necessary to tell the most compelling stories. But there's going to be an enormous amount of slop, garbage, quickly generated material for a quick buck, or filling up sort of the whatever place that maybe soap operas used to take, that kind of like just something to watch while you're standing in line. And a lot of that stuff might actually be fully generated script, generated endpoint, or generated result. That's kind of a bit the way the world is. You were talking a little bit about other countries and who are not held to the same restrictions we are. I'm already seeing that kind of material that people are putting out there, and full feature, fully generated, full feature. And nobody would want to watch it, but you know what? There might be some company that is buying content to put on TV at 2 o'clock in the morning that might buy it. You know what I mean? And not care what it is.
There's a saying I heard that I think touches on that, and it's dogs like to sniff other dogs. And I think it's something that we have to consider as we're moving forward, that humans like to watch things made by other humans. It's not going to be long before there's a robot that can run faster than a human, and that will be a novelty the first time it happens. But then we're probably going to go back to watching humans race each other because
we still watch Magnus Carlsen play chess.
Yeah,
even though he'll lose
exactly. And you know what? He'll lose 99 out of 100 times now to these really, really good AIs, and we're still watching him. And so I think, especially to the people listening, and watching, artist driven. Okay. It's going to be artist driven. And yes, there's going to be slop, but that will pass and that will fade, I think, very quickly. And I think it will fall into the back burner. I think if you want to make really good content with AI, you have to be artist driven and you're going to have some talent. It can be a writing partner, but it cannot be your writer, in my opinion.
Also, I actually tried the Blender MCP last week, and it's not one of these things where you say, create this and it's going to create it, because I've seen some people try it and it doesn't know what to create. But if I had some assets already in a scene, I said, take my assets and based on my camera frustum, sprinkle them randomly on the ground plane, and then pick the center one and then set the focal length so I can do depth of field. That worked. Then I would go in and I would have to like tweak a little bit and then ask it to do something else. But that's kind of how you use it right now. You're not going to say build me a medieval castle and blah blah. It doesn't know how to do that. It's never going to do that. I mean, maybe the image to text stuff was, but like I don't see it doing the geometry yet, where it knows how to like all the minutia of like, well, what kind of cornice do you want or what kind of column do you want? Like it's not there yet, and maybe it will be, but I don't know. There's still part of it, the creation process that you want to be in control of instead of just like hitting the button and let it do its thing. It's just not, I don't know. It's to me, that's not satisfying at all. I'd rather, just use it as an assistant.
Ian and Steve, I'm curious, how do you guys square the really great and creative work that we're doing now with AI with the fact that most of these models were trained on work that the creators have never been and never will be compensated for?
That's a tough one, and I have a weird view on this one, and it's a little non-standard. I think of it like this way. You're an artist and you train yourself on Walt Disney's style of drawing. Can you go and make a Mickey Mouse cartoon? Well, no. There's laws around that. You can't do that. But can you draw a cartoon in the style of Mickey Mouse that is something else? Yes, you learn that. You learn that artistic style. And I think this is the interesting thing about AI. It's not quite sentient and it's not quite alive, but it is learning and it is training. And so I think we need to give, and this is going to be tough, and I think it's going to require a slightly different way of thinking, but we're going to have to give some latitude to that, I think. We're going to have to give latitude to this idea that it is training on our work and it will be able to do similar things. And I think in a way, it's going to make certain pieces of our work so much more important. If you can come up with the Mickey, if you can come up with the Donald, if you can come up with the Magneto, right? That's where you define yourself. And I think this is going to be a really hard square to circle, to be honest.
I have a whole rant about this, but I'll try to keep it short. I'd hate it when the AI bros say, well, no one ever really creates anything original. You just copy from what happened before. But that's bullshit because you are not like, of course, there's that quote that's often taken out of context where it's like Picasso said, good artists copy, good artists steal. But the real intent behind it is you are you are bringing your own to it, and you're not stealing. Like you would not morally want to sit there and ape someone else's style and then call your own, but you want to learn what happened before you, and you learn and you study how someone might have painted or how they composed shapes or words or music. But the thing is, it's you as an individual. That's what you bring to the table. And so, let me just try to wrap this up really quickly. The thing is, I just lost my train of thought because I've gone on this rant a lot. The whole idea is that you need to have that muscle to want to create. Like the AI isn't going to be like wake up one day and go, I'm going to make something. I'm gonna make a watercolor. Or I'm going to create this. It doesn't do anything unless what we tell it to do. So we're the ones who are training it. As far as I've always been self-conscious about, I don't want to ape other people's design in my own work. So if I'm using something I'm trying to iterate on, I'm like, I'm not going to sit there and say, give me in the style of X concept artist. It's like, remember back in the day, fractal design, you were about like run the drawer Charrot, or the pointless filter on something. Why? It's like you're just putting a filter on something. That's exactly what the AI right now they want to do. Is like just put this filter on it and give me the Miyazaki look. It's like, come on, really? And then like you go through these like every couple days, people get these little on online, they do these little things, and then it kind of fades. Like for me, like I don't even use AI that much for that kind of stuff. I use it sparingly. So it's like you just have to like know when to use it, when not to use it. Okay, end rant.
Originality is king. I'll leave it on that one. Originality is king, and I think it's gonna stay that way.
Well, thank you everybody for being here with us tonight. Oh my goodness, this conversation is so exciting. Tranel, we have to wrap up. I'm so sorry.
All right. Thank you guys for letting us participate in the panel. Thanks everybody for joining in. And yeah, it's a really great time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tranel. You nailed it, man. You nailed it.
Great
Appreciate you.
questions, Janelle. Good job.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, bud. Take care.
And with that, yeah, I hand it off.
I hope to meet all of you in real life in LA. Maybe one day we'll all get together and continue this conversation.
I added everyone on Instagram, so everyone add as well. Let's stay in contact. Great panel. Everyone was so wonderful.
Nice meeting y'all.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for your time. It's been wonderful having you. To our moderator, Tranel Bland, and our esteemed presenters, a huge thank you for sharing your time and extensive knowledge with us. I want to acknowledge and thank the LAACM SIGGRAPH chapter technical production team, our lovely Joan Collins, co-chair and producer of tonight's panel, Friends and Donella, producer and volunteers chair, Ed Lentz, past chair and producer, David Benjamin for his technical support tonight. We are so grateful for your generosity. Leonard Daly, chair of Electronic Services Committee, and Diane People, past chair and producer. And I also want to take a moment to invite you to join our Los Angeles ACM SIGGRAPH professional chapter. If you're passionate about technology, creativity, and the future of computing, this is the place for you. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. Much appreciated.